Daryl, honestly, this has been something I've had to repent for and something I've really had to ask God for forgiveness for. I would have killed him at that moment. I was that angry, that resentful. Luckily, he's bigger than I am. So I went after him with everything I had. And I mean, it sounds funny, but it wasn't funny at the time.
I get it. Yeah.
I went after him with everything I had physically. So technically, he could have called the police on me. I would have been the one who was taken away for domestic violence. He gently laid me on the ground in the snow. I laid there for a few minutes crying and then went to work and called my sponsor. Here's the key. This is the shift. She said, Tanya, now you know how far you will go. Your children need you. They don't need one of you in prison and one of you dead. I mean, that's how bad it had gotten. So
You're listening to When God Intervenes, the podcast where faith, hope, and healing come together for families with a loved one battling addiction. All right. Hello, everybody, and welcome back. My name is Daryl Rogers. Welcome to another episode of When God Intervenes. I'm here today with Tanya Gioia, and Tanya's from Colorado, a really beautiful state. She sounds like she lives in a rural area and has a lot of chickens. Well, and we'll get into that a little bit later, which is really interesting to me because we have recently in the past year, we moved to the country. I didn't share that with you, Tanya, but we moved. We bought about 7 acres. I'd love to have about 20, but we bought about 7 acres in the country. Don't have any animals yet, but we love it out here. So anyway, but I'm so happy you were able to join us today, Tanya.
Well, thank you, Daryl. I appreciate it.
I'm looking forward to hearing your story, finding out more about the work that you do, and just from what little bit I've learned from you, I know that there are going to be a lot of ladies in particular, but everyone, that's in my audience, but especially some of the ladies are going to be interested in hearing what you have to say. So why don't you start out, just tell us a little bit about your background. Are you from Colorado originally? Or
I am not. I actually grew up in the Midwest. I had no idea about skiing. I had no idea about dirt biking. The closest my family ever came to camping was the Holiday Inn. They don't do tents, campers, anything like that. So I have learned a lot being out in Colorado. Wouldn't trade it for the world. And as you were talking about, one of the things I talk about is courts, cops, and chickens. And that is certainly a huge God intervention that we had while we were still living out on 20 acres and had 400 chickens at the time, which, Daryl, I could go with never seeing another chicken again, except for in cellophane. That's it. I'm kind of done with that. It was an interesting time in our life when our guys were little. So I have 2 boys. They are now coming on. One will be 20 and the other one will be 18 soon. And really, there was a huge God intervention when they were 3 and 5. And it started with several things, but I was reading The Purpose-Driven Life. And I was walking and praying every morning, walking, praying, crying. Anybody who's been in the situation is like, okay, I've done everything I need to do. And that's what I often tell women is, I've probably done everything you've done. I have pleaded, begged, kicked, screamed, cried, had that fit. In fact, we had a very painful episode that was me. This was not my husband. It was me. And this one I often tell because the person who may not be using the substance, it doesn't mean that they are emotionally in a place of stability. Oftentimes we are really dysregulated, 1, because of fear, and 2, because we don't know what to do. So that was a big piece where I reached out for education. I was already in Al-Anon, and we lived 22 miles from town. And I had asked my husband to get some milk. I have 2 small kids. Can you get some milk? And we were doing what a lot of couples do. He was going to work early and I was going to work late, so we didn't have to spend a lot of time on childcare. So he came home during nap time. The boys were in bed. I came out to get in the car. Where's the milk? There's no milk. I'm an up. I definitely am the angry, and he goes down. So he said, I don't have it. And Daryl, honestly, this has been something I've had to repent for, and something I've really had to ask God for forgiveness for. I would have killed him at that moment. I was that angry, that resentful. Luckily, he's bigger than I am, so I went after him with everything I had. And this. I mean, it sounds funny, but it wasn't funny at the time.
I get it. Yeah.
I went after him with everything I had physically. So technically, he could have called the police on me. I would have been the one who was taken away for domestic violence. He gently laid me on the ground in the snow. I laid there for a few minutes crying, and then went to work and called my sponsor. Here's the key. This is the shift. She said, Tanya, now you know how far you will go. Your children need you. They don't need one of you in prison and one of you dead. I mean, that's how bad it had gotten. So we are in this locked horns power struggle over. I mean, talk about silly, Daryl. This is about milk, right? This is about milk. I could have gone to the store. He could have gone back to the store. But in my mind, I had blown this completely out of proportion that, he can't take care of us. He doesn't love us. He's not paying attention to us. Some of this was true. He did love us.
Yeah.
But the awareness that other people had needs when you take drugs, when you use alcohol, when you do video games. So I don't put any addiction as worse than others. When we step out and we numb ourselves because we cannot manage our emotions, because we are dysregulated from whatever, whether it was trauma, whether it's what's going on presently, those types of things. It's the Gabor Mate theory of where is the pain? So what I didn't understand at that time was my husband was dealing with a lot of deep pain. He was dealing with a lot of deep issues. He had learned, unfortunately, from his family to manage this with substance, right? What did I learn? Manage it with anger. So look at who's the abuser in this situation. Yes, he didn't do what I asked him to do, but I took it to a physical level. That is never acceptable. So I'm speaking to all the women out there. It's not acceptable for him to get to a physical level, but ladies, it's not acceptable for you to get to a physical level. And there are a lot of men who will not deal with that because they're like, oh, well, she hits me. It's not a big deal. It is a big deal. That's not okay. And in the body of Christ, not to treat people with respect, love, and kindness, it's not okay. So that's what happened, but let's unpack what really happened. I am trying to hold this family together. I don't trust him, and I don't trust God to provide the answers. I am doing it out of sheer will and force. And my motto at the time, Daryl, was either help me or get out of the way. So I'm educated, I'm talented, I'm well-spoken. I can go make the money and fry it up in a pan. I can do all these things, but I couldn't make my family look the way I thought it should look. And the more I forced, the worse it got. So that's a piece that I was listening to one of your other podcasts, and he was talking about, are you going to love them into the grave?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
It was fabulous. But the other phrase that I heard from somebody that I just interviewed is, are you going to hate them into heaven?
Oh, wow.
And I think that one's really powerful because we have this sense that if I can put enough pressure, or if I can cause this situation to be bad enough, or if I can do something that makes that person wake up, then maybe they will get on the right track, right? So they're two sides of the same coin. The problem is this person is already in a lot of pain. They're already shaming themselves. They already feel unworthy. So I talk about this when my husband and I got married. We were two holy people, WHOLEY, holy people. We had holes all over the place. We tried to connect those holes and heal each other. And Daryl, you and I both know we're not capable of healing each other. We can
Right.
help the other one get to Jesus who can transform us, but we're
Mm-hmm.
not capable
Mm-hmm.
of doing that. So
Mm-hmm.
there's a misread of when you join together, you become one.
Mm-hmm.
What really it's about is two whole people joining, whole healthy people joining together and creating a new entity under
Mm-hmm.
God. They're creating
Uh-huh.
this new healthy entity. But no, we came together in this enmeshment style relationship and created even more of a mess.
Yeah. Yeah.
Neither one of us, even though, we could label him as the person using substance, neither one of us was healthy. I was using the relationship to build my self worth, and he was using substance to make sure he was okay and he could function.
Mm-hmm.
Our total unawareness of what healthy looked like
Mm-hmm.
created this
Mm-hmm.
enmeshment. And now we'd brought two little people into this.
Right. Yeah. And there's so much to unpack there. You said a lot. I mean, there's dysfunction in every family. There's some level of dysfunction in every family because we live in a broken world. We're if you want to call it trauma, if you want to call it sin, it's like we've all been traumatized at some point as children, in some way, shape, or form. Not even necessarily always by our parents.
Right.
Although none of us had perfect parents, right? And so we bring those traumas into a marriage, and then we end up traumatizing our kids, to some
Absolutely.
extent. To some extent, I mean, it's much worse in some families than in others, but our children are definitely impacted by our own problems that we have, and so yeah, it's a mess. It's
It
a
was
mess.
a mess. Well, and the piece that I work with women on now that I didn't quite have that. Now, I was raised in the church,
Hmm.
did kind of the college fall away for a little while. I even have a master's degree in theological studies, but I was working more in conflict resolution at that time. Technically, if you looked at me, I had all the skills. What I
Hmm.
didn't know, what I really didn't have, was my identity in Christ and
Hmm.
the
Hmm.
understanding that nobody could take that away from me. That no matter what or who the world said I was, I'll get that right, said I was, I could still go back to scripture and say, no, this is who God says I
That's
am.
right.
But I didn't,
Yep.
despite having all that head knowledge, I didn't
Hmm.
have presence in my heart knowledge. So when the family wasn't acting right or my husband wasn't acting right, that was a reflection on me. It's kind of like this little story of um, this family has had their house robbed, right?
Hmm.
But the woman is in there busily cleaning up because she can't stand the thought of the police coming over to a messy house.
Uh-huh.
I mean, how confusing is that when they need to come over and see what's really happening, but she's going to cover it up. So that's where I work with women is who and whose you are, coming
Hmm.
back to that identity piece,
Hmm.
because then we need to go into, and here's the whole program, values, vision, right? And
Hmm.
then the actual application. So we need values, vision, voice, because what happens often is, so in the story that I told you, in a way you'd say, well, Tanya, you had a voice, you're yelling at him, you're all over the place. But no, that was just a cover voice for how
Yeah.
sad I was, how hurt
Hmm.
I was, how
Hmm.
confused I was. Anger feels powerful when really it's probably one of the weakest things that you can do.
Yeah. Yeah. That's really good. Yep. I agree 100%. There's a couple of different things you hit on there, and you may have seen me taking some notes over here, and it's because I don't want to forget. I don't want to forget to come back and talk about some of these things. One of the things you talked about earlier was control.
Mm,
Trying, attempts to control other people, and that always ends in frustration for both parties, right?
absolutely.
And
Well, go ahead.
yeah, I was just going to say it's really and look, we're all guilty of it. And look, um, big time over here. So so I'm not pointing any fingers at anybody here, but it's really a lack of trust in God. You know, it really is, especially when I talk to parents about their children. I mean, you have to, at some point, especially once your child is an adult, you have to let go of those attempts to control, and you have to trust God with the outcome, you know. And the more you try to control them, the more they're going to push back, and you get all this resentment going on, and it just spirals out of control, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, and here's this is a really interesting book. So Mel Robbins, who's out in the media, basically secular, wrote "Let Them and Let Me." So I will often talk to wives, sometimes moms, and they'll say, "Okay, but I can't live the way we're living,
Mm-hmm.
right?"
Mm-hmm.
The one thing you can control is you and your actions.
Yep.
And the idea that we didn't create it, we can't cure it, and we can't control it, and we didn't cause it. That's
Mm-hmm.
true.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
It is true. But there's another one. We can affect it. We can positively or negatively affect it. So, what does the Bible say? It's better to live in a corner of a rooftop than with a nagging wife. So, if you are nagging, you
Yeah.
are not displaying Christian love to your husband, your children, whoever.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Once is a request, twice is a campaign,
Yeah.
and third is a war,
Yeah.
right? So you're setting up this barrier in your war. So what can you do?
Mm-hmm.
One of it is one of the things that I was not letting happen. Let natural consequences take place,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So we didn't have any milk. Am I going to ask him to go back to the store? Possibly. Are we going to do without and tell the children, you need to go talk to your dad about why we don't have any milk? Right?
Mm-hmm.
My children are not going to starve. We live in a first world country. There were things there. It wasn't going to be easy, but they weren't going to starve. So natural
Right.
consequences is one of them. And then the other is, what can I do? Here is where the rubber hits the road with most women.
Mm-hmm.
I have decided that my safety, this is not trusting God, my safety depends on you acting in a way that I perceive you could act so
Mm-hmm.
that I feel safe, which means my job is to fix you. The minute I get into fixing you, I've abandoned myself,
Yep.
right? So
Yep.
when I am calling on God, God's like, where are you? Because you've abandoned yourself. You've abandoned yourself to this role over here. So when
Mm-hmm.
I learned about, we all know about fight, flight, freeze,
Mm-hmm.
fix is also a safety response.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So if I can't fix this so that I feel safe, I'm going to go into a panic and I'm going to push every button I can think of.
I use another C in there. You know, you were talking about the three C's earlier, and one of the C's I say is, you know, you can contribute to the problem. Yeah, you didn't cause it, you can't control it, you can't cure it, but you can contribute to the problem, or you can contribute to the solution.
Right.
And I'll say this too, and you've already basically said this. I may just be maybe just be rephrasing a little bit, but there's only one person in this equation you have any control over, and that's yourself.
Mm-hmm.
So get busy controlling that person, because if you think you have that person 100% in control, you're delusional too.
Well, I want to give you another piece of that, especially for women, is get busy taking care of that person. We're so outward focused on taking care of
Mm-hmm,
everybody else that
mm-hmm.
if they're okay, then I'm okay. I've heard the
Right.
statement that a woman is only as happy as her happiest or her most unhappy child, right? She can't be
Mm-hmm,
happy if she's got an unhappy child. I beg to differ. Jesus offers us the opportunity, and Paul talks about it. I can be content in want, or I can be content in plenty. I've got a friend right now who is really, she's in the thick of it. Her son is in a detention center. He's turning 18. Then the question is, what next? He's doing well enough that they don't really want to put him in jail. On the other hand, is he going to be able to make it on his own? He can't come home unless there's some boundaries in place, and they have done extensive work around that, and he has chosen
mm-hmm,
not to participate in that. So
mm-hmm.
then you look at this and you think, okay, do I need to stay home and be miserable and woe is me and not show up at work and tell everybody, what's going on and all of the pressures that I'm facing? Well, I think there's a close circle that need to be supportive and be there
Mhm.
for you. But
Mhm.
that's not how Jesus asked us to live our lives. He said, there's going to be trouble. You're going to
Yeah.
have to deal with some hard and heavy things.
Yeah.
What Paul has added to that is you can experience joy. Because didn't he write Philippians? He's in a prison with the sewer running through it. You can
Yeah.
experience joy and have trouble. So
Yeah.
that's where women can start to take care of themselves and say, it's okay for me to take a nap. It's okay for me to go to a girlfriend's house and get some support. I can let go. That's why if you start with anything, Mel Robbins' book is fabulous because it really talks about how you can let them and how I can let me. I can
Mhm.
let go of some things. Now,
Mhm.
I'm
Mhm.
going to say this, and this is kind of like love them into the grave, where I had to get to, and again, mine was a husband, right? I
Mhm.
think I would
Mhm.
get there with my older teenage kids too. We have responsibility for our little ones.
Mhm.
Absolutely. But when
Yep.
they get to a certain age and they're making their choices, they need to be suffering their own consequences.
Yep. Yep.
And I had to get to a point with my husband to say, I need to let go enough that if he chooses to die in a ditch, I need to give him the dignity to do that because
Yep.
otherwise I'm going to be the parent for the rest of our marriage. And Daryl, I
Mhm.
didn't marry an adult male to parent him.
Right.
And
Right.
Jesus doesn't want me to parent him. And the adult male does not want me to parent him. And what
That's right.
example am I setting up for my young men who are going to eventually go out and marry women? And
Mhm.
I'm like, shoot, if they bring me home how I was 20 years ago,
Mhm.
I don't know that I'm going to like her.
Right. uh, I do see situations with women who I was sharing with you earlier before we started recording about they get resentful over the fact that their husband is leaving them in a situation where
Mm,
they're having to take care of the family, and they're just like, why can't he just stop using,
yes.
and I don't know. Can you speak to that just a little bit?
Sure. And we say it about our kids too. Well,
Hmm.
let's look at this. In this situation, one, probably that woman has taken on too much responsibility. She should have
Hmm.
backed away earlier, but that's hard because it is very much like the frog in the boiling water. It's a slow creep. I
Hmm.
didn't take
Hmm.
this on. There can be the scenario of where before the kids came, we used to go out and party together. Everything was fine. We were kind of on this
Hmm.
level footing, blah, blah, blah. I quit. He didn't. Or there could be one where, I've seen it with these younger ones, the video gaming, we did all this together and that was fine. And now it has escalated. All addictions deteriorate, right? They begin to
Uh-huh.
escalate. Here's the thing, what is happening with the resentment is I have created a situation to where I've said, you should be doing this. So my expectation has created the resentment,
Hmm.
which it's hard to realize that. But an expectation is a resentment waiting to happen.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now, with that, what I just gave you about you can make a request once, then there's a campaign, then there's a war. What happened is
Hmm.
they've made the request, it was unfulfilled. She had the expectation that it would get fulfilled. Then she made it into a campaign of how do I make him do this,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
And then there's a war. So now you've got the power struggle. Then the
Hmm.
resentments come in when the power struggle happens. What this is a lack of healthy boundaries.
Yeah. Yeah.
So when you get into this tit for tat and there's a lack of healthy boundaries, then you are fighting some other pieces that are much deeper, right?
Hmm.
Daryl, I can still tell you that nobody grows up and says, look, I want to drink all day, I want to play video games all day, and I want to feel good about myself.
Hmm.
They
Hmm.
don't. There's enough pain in there. They're shaming themselves enough that when you come along and shame them too,
Yeah.
and remember the difference between shame and guilt is shame is I'm bad. And if you're saved in Christ, we are no longer to live in shame. We can still have guilt that
Uh-huh.
says, poof, I've done something wrong and I need to do something about this. So if
Yeah.
she's built up this resentment, she needs to go back and look at where she didn't set a boundary.
Uh-huh.
Right.
Uh-huh.
So this could be, I've got a really simple story about this. My husband worked at night. He wasn't coming home till late at night. We lived out on a ranch. I'm worried that he's dead in a ditch somewhere. I haven't let go of this. And I went to my Al Anon group and I said, guys, I'm staying up late. I want to see him when he comes home, all those types of things. And I can't get up in the morning to take care of my kids. I'm exhausted. I'm exhausted all day. I'm snappy, all those types of things. And I've told him he needs to be home by 11 o'clock.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And these older, wiser women looked at me and said, honey, you can't set a boundary for him. You cannot boundary him into responsibility. So here's the key. Boundaries are things that you can control. What can I control in
Mm-hmm.
that situation? When I went to bed. Now I could make a request, but he may choose not to follow through with the request. And then
Mm-hmm.
I have to decide what a big deal it is. So what they did was they freed me. They said, go to bed when you need to go to bed. Turn this over to God and trust that he's got it handled.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And then you'll be able to take care of your children in the morning. It sounds so simple, but I feel like I had, as a partner, responsibility to know or be able to answer the phone if something was going on. On the other hand, I wasn't able to do the primary thing that I needed to be doing, which was taking care of these kiddos early in the morning. So the healthy
Mm-hmm.
boundary was something, what could I control when I went to bed? Could I
Mm-hmm.
boundary him into responsibility that said, I don't feel good unless you're here at 11 o'clock. I don't feel safe, blah, 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 blah. Those types of things. No. So what I was doing was I set it up to fail. So if you
Uh-huh.
look at what you have claimed are boundaries in your life, are they things you can control? Or are you trying to boundary somebody into
Right.
responsibility?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I made a little video about that the other day, and there's so many different analogies you can use on the boundaries, but so where we live, we have a lot of deer, and I've seen up to 9 deer in the yard at a time. They eat my grass. I'm trying to
Yeah.
grow some lawn, and we have some young trees that we planted out there. Some are fruit trees, and then some are just ornamentals. But the deer will eat on the trees. So I put fencing up around all of the trees, and my analogy was that I'm not trying to control the deer. The deer, they can wander around and do whatever they want to do and go wherever they want to go. But I have boundaries around. The boundaries are there to protect the trees. They're
Yes.
to protect what's on the inside, not to control the deer. And this is the same with our addicted loved ones. Um, when you set boundaries, those boundaries are there to protect whatever is on the inside. And it could be emotional protection, protect you from being on an emotional roller coaster. And in some cases, it's for physical protection.
Yes. And let me put this in a biblical context. So, in the garden, we
Mm-hmm.
see that God has said, eat everything except for this one tree. When
Mm-hmm.
Adam and Eve crossed that boundary, did God leave them?
Nope.
No. He said, okay, I've given you more access than you're able to manage.
Uh-huh.
Right? You couldn't handle the responsibility. So I'm going to have to change your access, which means I'm picking you up and putting you outside of the garden. What else did he do? He spoke with them. He talked
Mm-hmm.
them through it. He said there will be
Mm-hmm.
some consequences. And then he killed the first animal and made them close.
Mm-hmm.
So especially when you're working with children, have you given them too much access, more than what they can handle?
Mm-hmm.
Either emotionally, physically, financially, is there too much access going on? It shifts some with adults,
Mm.
but with kids, can I give you another little story?
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
I am
Great.
really proud of my now 20-year-old. He was 16 and I thought, let's learn how to use a credit card because most of these kids are not going to use cash. It's going to be
Mm.
Venmo, it's going to be credit card, it's going to be all these things that, you and I learned by doing cash, but that's just not a reality anymore.
Right.
So
Yeah.
anyway, I said, let's give him a junior credit card. And he was driving. So I wanted him, if there was a flat tire or if he needed gas or something had happened, I wanted him to have some access to
Mm-hmm.
money.
Mm-hmm.
And he came to me in this office in the pink room and came to me about, I don't know, 6 months later. And he handed me the credit card and he said, I can't manage this. He
Wow.
said, they had vendors at school. He said, I've been getting candy bars and sodas and all this stuff that really shouldn't be in school anyway. He said, I've been using this credit card for this. I probably owe you. I said, well, let's look it up. He owed me $90. He said, I'm going to pay that back. But he said, I can't manage this. So what I had done is I had given him too much access and he didn't
Mm.
have the responsibility level to handle it.
Mm. Mm.
Where
Well,
this
that's really good.
becomes
Yeah.
really important is in emotions.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Have you given over too much access to somebody who doesn't have the emotional responsibility to handle the access that you've given them?
Uh-huh.
And then you're thinking, okay, well, who can I depend on? Who can I trust? Who can I really have show up and love me? Because we've tweaked this uncomfortably in that we're really looking for love and connection. Well, when your loved
Mm-hmm.
one is using videos, pornography, whatever, they're connecting over there instead of connecting with you.
Mm-hmm.
What can you do? That's where you need to take it to Jesus. That's where you need to say, okay, I've given too much emotional access to this person because they can't fill me from an empty cup. Their cup is empty.
Yeah.
How do I get full? And
Mm-hmm.
that's where all the head knowledge is not going to help you with the presence of Jesus. That's where you
Mm-hmm.
get in scripture, you do the laments, you do the quiet sitting, you do all the things that will connect you to somebody who loves you deeply, who
Mm-hmm.
wants the
Mm-hmm.
best for you. He's never going to lie, never going to manipulate, never going to cheat,
That's
never
right.
going to be gaslighting is one of our favorite terms right now,
Oh
or
yeah.
narcissistic, or all of
Yeah.
those things,
Uh-huh.
because we're running to resources, food, movies, friends, this spouse or child, to try and fill us when there really is only one source.
That's right.
You have to get the filling from there. So
Mm-hmm.
it's a misguided attempt. So the resentment is, Daryl, I've come to you. I've said, I need you to do whatever. Take the garbage out, clean out the garage, take me on a date, whatever that is. And you're not able to do it.
Mm-hmm.
So those are legitimate needs. How do I get the legitimate needs met? And then how do I begin to set boundaries and say, all right, if you're not able to help me with the garage or clean the house, maybe we need to make a budget piece that says we need a housekeeper because I
Mm-hmm.
can't manage that, the kids and the job that I have.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But there will come a time if the addiction escalates that you're going to have to draw some harder lines.
Yeah.
You can do it with love. This is
Yeah.
not the enemy. And that's the hardest piece, is looking at that person with the addiction and to say that is a hurt person who is spiritually sick. That's what
Yeah.
we know.
Yeah.
And I don't want to, I love this phrase, I don't want to love him into the grave and I don't want to hate him into heaven.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
God never wanted you. He already did the sacrifice. He doesn't want you to be the sacrifice for them.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I think the love, and I know I just talked to somebody about this not too long ago, and I can't remember when it was, and maybe it was on another interview, but this is something that's really been just in the forefront of my mind lately, is about loving people. Most people, I think in a lot of people's minds, that means being non-confrontational. You know what I mean? Like, you love somebody, then you don't ever speak harshly to them, And what I would say is that um, there's a balancing act that you have to strike there. In other words, you have to, number one, get your You have to make sure that your motives are pure. If you're confronting someone in love about something, you're having a hard conversation with them. Are your motives pure?
Mm.
Number one. And then if the answer is yes, you cannot allow yourself. I think a lot of times those are really hard conversations to have, and sometimes people are so scared of the pushback or blowback or whatever, that they'll just not have the conversation, or they think it's not loving to have that conversation. And sometimes the most loving thing you can do is tell someone the truth that they really need to hear. But it's how you do it that is important.
Yes.
It's how you deliver it is important. So you have to be in control of your emotions, not allow your emotions to drive you or to get out of control in the middle of that communication. Does that make sense?
Perfectly. And that's what, so the therapeutic term is regulation versus dysregulation. If my person is already dysregulated, then I'm probably feeling dysregulated too. How do I get
Mm-hmm.
regulated before I have the conversation? And the other key is timing. So I work with a lot
Mm-hmm.
of programs where we really talk about timing. When they are in the process of use or coming down off of that use, video games, pornography, whatever is, or substance, that's not the time to talk to them. So what you
Mm-hmm.
need to do is spend some time studying when they are in their most sober state. What does that look like?
Right.
Typically
Yeah.
it's early in
Yeah.
the morning. What does that
Yeah.
look like?
Yeah.
And then you ask permission. I have some
Mm-hmm.
things I'd like to talk to you about. After having first regulate, you need to be regulated, because we will either borrow your dysregulation or you will borrow my regulation, right? So I
Mm-hmm.
don't want to walk away dysregulated. I want to
Mm-hmm.
maintain my peace, right? We're back to Paul. We can
Mm-hmm.
maintain
Mm-hmm.
peace in any situation. So by having that hard conversation in a place where I am regulated, ask permission, have the timing, and then I have to have a boundary. If they're going to blow up at me, if they're going to name call, if they're going to yell, if they're going to get physical, I
Mm.
need to be in a space where I can remove myself. I can't control them with a boundary, but I
That's right.
can remove myself. So there's a
Yeah.
lot of steps to this conversation, rather than, this is where we get into trouble, rather than I'm in the kitchen making dinner, they come in totally dysregulated. I know things have been going on. I knew it the second the car pulled up. Can I stay regulated through that? Because that's not the time for the conversation.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
that is a really hard sequence and choice. You don't even have to be in an addictive relationship to know that there are times where you should not be having that conversation, because you don't have yourself in control. Because
Mm-hmm.
what
Mm-hmm.
does God say? He says that the tongue is probably the most dangerous body part,
Yeah.
the most dangerous weapon, and especially for women, right?
Mm.
Because it's one of the things that we're really good at
Oh yeah.
and we can use really well, and we
Yeah.
cut. And even though the males in your life may look stonewall, you're cutting them.
Yeah.
They can
Yeah.
feel that. So the
Oh.
sarcastic remarks,
Mm.
the ugly statements, all of those types of things, really what's happening for you is you're hurt and you feel sad, but it's
Mm-hmm. Mm.
easier to be angry. So there's a lot of pieces to that. And that's one of the things we go over in Grace and Recovery is timing, permission. What am I going to say when my boundaries have been crossed? So my oldest will say to me, he'll say, he'll say, I've got to ask you something. And then he'll look at his watch and he'll go, it's after 8:30. So if I want the answer that I would prefer to have, I probably shouldn't talk to you after 8:30 p.m. I'm like, you're right. That's good. So that's a very simple boundary that doesn't have to do with addiction, but I know after 8:30, having gotten up at 4:30, I'm beginning to shut down. So I've
Right.
trained my family to say, if I want the answer I want,
Mm-hmm.
then coming to me at that time is not a great time. It's the same thing with the person who's trying to deal with the person who's struggling with addiction is,
Mm-hmm.
if you want improvement, coming to them in bad timing is pretty much guaranteeing a fight and power struggle.
Mm-hmm.
Now, Daryl, here's the really ugly part. Most people don't want a solution, they just want relief.
Yeah.
So remember, I told you I'm an up. So by
Yeah.
yelling and raging at my husband, I did get some relief.
Yeah.
Just
Yeah.
like somebody going out and smoking pot, I did get some relief.
Mm-hmm.
Did it
Mm-hmm.
solve the problem? Did it make it worse? So I got this instant relief, just like using a substance, but I
Mm.
made the problem worse, hid
Uh-huh.
my pain, and became the bully in the relationship.
That is
It
so
was a no
good.
win.
Yeah, that is so, so good. Yeah, thank you for sharing that. Um, yeah, you're so right. I mean, solutions are difficult, right? There's a lot of work involved. Relief is temporary, but it's easy. It's like
Yeah.
instantaneous. It's easy to get that relief, right? So yeah, you're right. People want to go for the relief. Um,
And for a lot of women, it's either this anger blow up or it's
mhm.
stonewalling, the silence, I don't talk to you, or unfortunately for us in this country at least, it's food. And then we've
Yeah.
just with all of those choices, we've just compounded the original problem,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
one of the release valves is to make your list of 10 things you could do instead of doing whatever action it is that yes brings relief but causes you long-term issues. So
Hmm.
maybe that is he walks in, I don't like the behavior that's going on. I'm in the middle of dinner. I've done this before. I've said, okay, I can't continue with this, but I'm hungry. The kids are hungry. You're in no state to go out. I'm going to go get the car keys. Would you like me to bring you back anything? Because
Hmm.
I'm at the point where I cannot deal anymore.
Yeah,
I
I
got
get
young
it.
kids,
Yep.
they're hungry. I have availability to go out, had the money to do that. Didn't
Hmm.
want to be in there, but
Hmm.
hungry, angry, lonely, tired are an issue. So I'm going to go solve my issue,
Hmm. Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
I'm not offering for you to go with me because at this point I can't face what's going on with you.
Right.
I'm
Yep.
going to get out of that space.
Yep.
So I've created a boundary again.
Yep. Hmm.
Now, when you come home and all is well and you're sober and all those things, I may say to you, hey, reward the behavior you want, not the behavior you don't want.
That's right.
Hey,
Yep.
it's so
Yep.
nice to have you here. Sit down. Let's have a long conversation. I've
Hmm.
made dessert. I'm even going to make some coffee after dinner. Let's sit here. Reward the behavior you want.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, I agree. That's really good. Um, so you talked about joy in the midst of the chaos. You can find joy, and there's a process for that. Take me through that a little bit, and then just tell the listeners, and kind of in the process maybe of going through that, about your work and your process, and any and how they can get in touch with you.
Sure, absolutely. So I've been reading a book by a 103-year-old woman. If I can pull it up, we'll leave you links on what it is. And one of the things she said was, when you think about how water flows or how a river flows, or man, if you've had a leak in your house, that water gets in some way, right?
Hmm.
So God has given us this gift of joy. And
Uh-huh.
even when the boulder seems in the way or all the trash gets in the way, look at where the joy is leaking in. Somewhere it's there. So what we focus on expands. If I'm going to focus on the trash, and we often make the person with the addiction the trash can. If you were sober, then the mortgage would get paid, the kids would be fine, the car would run, the dog wouldn't be having these issues, all those things would be solved. We know really cognitively that's not true. So look for where the trickle is around the boulder. And since I live in Colorado, we've got a lot of mountain streams. Look for where the trickle is. It may not be a huge trickle. We were really struggling when my youngest was born, and it was just before Courts, Cops, and Chickens. But sitting down and holding him and nursing him and cuddling him was such a great joy that when I began to focus on that, I could get meals on the table. I could get diapers changed. I could get those things done.
Mm.
Read Philippians. There are tons of passages about joy. It is taking your thoughts captive, looking for the trickle. God is constantly putting, the sunset, the sunrise, the stars, all those things. He's constantly putting things in front of you that are joyful. You
Mm-hmm.
have
Mm-hmm.
to look for them, especially in times of crisis.
Mm-hmm.
And most people who have been through heavy grieving, heavy death, loss, those types of things, loss of a job, relationship, all those, will say, I cried until I couldn't cry anymore. And
Mm-hmm.
David talks about this too in the Psalms. And then the joy came in the morning. There was a
Mm-hmm.
great cup of coffee. There was, sitting down and being quiet. There was a phone call from a girlfriend. The other
Mm-hmm.
thing for joy, I would say, is don't isolate. So
Mm-hmm.
often what we do when there's addiction, when there's something we feel we can't talk about, we isolate.
Yep.
And by isolating, we're moving away from God's community. He never meant us to be alone. So we're
Mm-hmm.
moving away from those things that could bring us joy. We're moving away from those people who could bring laughter. Some of our greatest comics have come out of rotten circumstances, but
Mm-hmm.
now they're
Mm-hmm.
able to build the joy and the humor in there. So where am I? I'm
Yep.
over at TanyaGioia.com. I also run a podcast called Faith Over Addiction. We talk about very similar things to Daryl. We focus in on your identity as a woman. And then I also run a program called Grace and Recovery. And we look specifically at your values, your vision, and your voice and how you want to use that. Because I
Okay.
don't think any woman really wants to scream at her husband and her kids.
Right.
It is momentary relief that brings long-term consequences.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yep. Absolutely. Well, Tanya, I've enjoyed having you on the podcast today. I mean, enjoyed getting to know you a little bit better. And man, so many nuggets of wisdom that you dropped today. And we need to do this again.
Please, I'd love to. Yeah, it's the ADHD. I claim it. I'm like all over the place. But if you can follow the trickle,
Yeah.
there are some nuggets in here that'll be
No,
usable.
there's a lot of good stuff. Really
And
good.
that's what I would say to women as a takeaway is, where are you feeling overwhelmed?
Mm-hmm.
Take a look at what that overwhelm is, and where is a place you can rest in the Holy Spirit. So
Mm-hmm.
if it's, every night at dinner, life is just driving me crazy, can you take 15 minutes and sit down, maybe listen to praise and worship? I've been listening to Ephesians on Audible. Where can you sit before you go in and tackle what could be difficult for
Mm-hmm.
you? So
Mm-hmm.
that self-care is not about nails and manicures and
That's
having
right.
nice clothes. It's
Mm-hmm.
about getting in the presence of Jesus and saying, I can't do this by myself.
Mm-hmm.
Can you fill me? Can you give me the strength to do this?
Yeah. Yeah. That's good. That's a good note to end on. Well, I can tell that God has definitely intervened in your life. and I've really enjoyed the conversation, Tanya. Um, and I hope to talk again soon. Thank you for
Well,
being here.
thank you, Daryl. Thank you for all the work you're doing. Whew. Husband is one thing, children is another. That's a hard place to be, and I'm glad you're sharing that with people. What a
Thank you
blessing.
so much. Thank you. Thank you for tuning in to When God Intervenes. If you found today's episode helpful, please subscribe and leave a review. Your feedback helps us reach more families in need of hope and healing. For more resources and support, visit our website at thefamilyrecoverycoach.com. Until next time, stay strong and keep the faith.